Tonight's event is called Recharge, and it's focused on supporting those who are pivoting into a new space or trying to figure out how to integrate their JET or Japan experience and interest into their current positions. My name is Jessica Livingston. I'm the Executive Director of USJETAA. I was a Hokkaido JET from 03 to 06, and I've spent the last 20 plus years engaging with and serving the US, Japan, and JET and JETAA communities. For those of you that don't know, USJETAA is a nonprofit, and our mission is to strengthen US-Japan relations through providing opportunities and support to our extensive JET alumni network, which is now about 40,000 strong just in the United States, which is pretty amazing. I want to thank Japan Foundation of New York for supporting our JET alumni community through this evening's event. And I also wanted to let you know we have one more event in this series called Fuel, and it's coming up on March 19th. And the lovely Christy and lovely Emily will be there as well. So if you can make it, that will be great. We'll be focusing on providing some guidance and some key areas to build your career. I will put the link to that registration in the chat for those that would like to join and register. And then I want to introduce tonight's speakers. We have Emily Frank of Career Catalyst. Emily is a professional career counselor with over 15 years of experience, ranging from higher ed to private practice. She was also a Hokkaido JET, which makes her super cool. She was a JET from 93 to 96, and she's coached a lot of other JETs, both individually and in groups over the last 5 years. Her practice covers pretty personal topics like identity and finding meaning, as well as the more nitty-gritty parts like resumes and salary negotiations. And we also have Christy Ishii with us tonight. Christy was a Gunma JET and an ex-executive recruiter in Tokyo, which is pretty cool. After coming back to the States and struggling to find her purpose in a workplace, she launched a coaching company called Christy Mariko Coaching. And it supports bilingual professionals through a range of life transitions like repatriation decisions, career changes, mindset transformations, and career planning. So I'm going to hand it over to them. I'm going to be monitoring the chat. So if you have questions throughout the evening, just throw them in there and I will do my best to interrupt Emily and Christy so that they can answer those questions for you. I think that's it. I'm going to unspotlight myself and hand it over to you all, and I will do my best to manage the screens.
All right, excellent. Well, Christy, would you like to go first? I think I went first last time.
Yeah, I just wanted to let everyone have a minute on your own to take a look at what's coming in on the Padlet that we sent out. So we're not going to screen share it right now at this moment, but give yourselves a minute to just kind of like scroll through. I noticed that over half the folks here are definitely looking for a career change and or in a career change currently, and some folks are unsure. And is anyone else? Oh, for the link, you might have to just refresh it if there are some folks having issues with the link, but it should be accessible. We see a lot of comments coming in, so maybe just refresh. But thank you for letting us know in the chat. And also, it's just really nice to see the diversity in how people are deciding to make career decisions, and just knowing that in today's session, it is a very safe space to ask questions, and no one will be judging your questions or decision-making process, because as we all know, every situation is different. And in this discussion today, we just want to be as open as possible to be resources, but also to bounce back and forth ideas that are circulating within your minds or that you want to add to the chat. So the icebreaker here is a good way to see what's in the room. And I just wanted to highlight and spotlight that for a minute before we get started in talking about our own journeys and how we connected back to either Japan or the JET community. And so give you
those of you who are having trouble with the link, have you been able to get in? Did refreshing it do the trick?
No,
Maybe.
but it's probably just something in my settings. If everyone else is not having problems with it, it's probably something with my computer. So I'm trying to figure it out. Thank you.
Okay, and then if it's not working on there, feel free to, you can also drop it into the chat as well. That way we can still see what you are sharing. That's totally fine too.
And just to remind you, we'll say this a couple of times, I think, as we talk to you all here today, but if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate, don't be shy. If you don't necessarily want everyone knowing all your business, you are more than welcome to send a question directly to me or to Christy or to Jessica. We're always happy to read those out without necessarily saying your name. But we definitely want this to be an open, comfortable space for you to ask your questions and so forth. And if you're feeling really, really lost or overwhelmed by the process, you're not alone. So don't be embarrassed about that. But if you don't necessarily want to be public about it, let us know. All right, shall we jump into content?
Yes, yeah. I think we can throw up
All
the
right.
slides now. Yeah.
She's on it. She's getting
Hold
it
on,
right.
I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
Well, while we await our content, we will just let you know that there are kind of three main areas that we're going to be leaning into today that we will see here in a moment. But we're really glad to have you all here. So shall we advance here to our three areas? There's me and Christy. All right. So this is what we're going to be touching on tonight. And I know it can be really confusing when you're thinking you want maybe a new career that reconnects you to Japan or JET. So what we generally say is let's maybe look at your why and your aligned action, and then kind of do the connect a little bit towards the end of this process. Christy, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, and the reason why the three, so myself, Emily, and Jessica, we're each going to share individual experiences with this Connect to Japan and JET component, because we want to share how diverse this process is, and it will preface the reflection and the action items that we talk about later. And so just keep that in mind. It all makes sense by the end of today. So
Eyes together. All right.
yes.
All right, excellent. Well, let's jump on into the next slide, Van. All right.
Did this
Any
already?
questions so far about this? Do we want to share it? We can wait.
I think it's okay this time. I think some
Okay.
people, yeah, most people are able to
Since
see.
people were having, yeah, okay, perfect. All right. Well, so when we're talking about all of this and how you connect it in Japan to your career, to your sort of personal mission statement, etc., like we said, there are a lot of ways you can approach this. Thing we will remind you of here is that arguably, Christy and I do a lot of very, very similar work, but I think you'll see as we tell our stories that we have approached it in really, really different ways. So for me, when I decided I needed to kind of reconnect with my experiences in Japan, it was when I was working in higher education. And I started to feel discontent in my role. I still really like working with the students, but I did start to feel kind of a sense of misalignment. Things weren't quite clicking the way I wanted them to. And so I was thinking I would go into private practice, and I actually reached out to Jessica and asked what kinds of resources she might have and who she might connect me with. And I got this really nice, rich pool of folks that are doing things related to JET, either as volunteers or in a professional capacity, and started doing a lot of presentations just like this. And the values that are reflected in this process for me are really a heavy focus on the freedom to do things like do my work in my own way, try new things, experiment, see kind of what works and what holds together. And then, of course, underlying all of that is my deep desire to really be of service to people, to really help people in this community, because I know how difficult and frustrating it can be. So, really, my sort of underlying mission for the work that I do is focused on helping people give themselves permission to do the things they want to do in their careers. And I talk a lot about permission in my individual sessions because I think we often tell ourselves we're not allowed to do things. So, my story is going to be very different from Christy's and from Jessica's.
Okay, so yeah, my story is different from Emily's, of course, because I'm a different person. I've always been connected with Japan since I was really little, like a year and a half. And I kept noticing throughout my life that, you know, the little strings here and there that brought me joy. And for me, it was I had always done a lot of teaching, but teaching in different ways. And I didn't necessarily enjoy being up in front of a classroom, but I did really like sharing information with people and enabling them to do what they wanted to do. And seeing that they were a part of the larger world in an important way. So I could, you know, after hindsight's 2020, right? So when you look back, it's a lot easier to see all the threads that are connective. But I could see those things after, you know, a few years down the road. And I understood that I could really pursue what I enjoyed within the Japan space. So the things that were really important to me were education and learning, helping people see new things in a new way. I also need to be challenged personally. I don't like to stagnate with what I'm doing. If I'm doing the same thing for about 2 years, it gets really boring for me. So after I'm done refining it, I need a new challenge. And it's also really important to me to help people understand that they're a global citizen. Prior to the JET program, I worked for the National Park Service as a park ranger. And one of the things that I did there was help people connect with their public lands and understand the stewardship and ownership that they and the responsibilities that came with that. And then after JET, I worked at the Japanese consulate as the JET program coordinator. And again, I was helping people connect with the larger world and understand that they were they were a global citizen and they had responsibilities as a global citizen to be an ambassador for their own country and to go forward and share their experiences with other people in a respectful and responsible way. So I kind of took all that together and I was able to apply it really with a lot of value to me in the US-Japan workspace. So I kind of found my own way. Being a park ranger is really different from being an ALT on the JET program, and it sounds like it's totally not connected, but once you start thinking about it, you can find those connections and kind of bring them together in a confluence and go forward. So Christy, I'll hand it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your journey, and as well as Emily. It's really interesting for me to hear like the different backgrounds of like how folks got into their roles, even within like USJETAA. It's just you really can never pinpoint. Like jets are so unique. It's almost like everyone has such a like I don't want to use the word crazy, but it's just such a unique career path that it always it blows my mind really. I when it comes to connecting JET and Japan to my career, after the JET program, I went to Tokyo for 2 years and I did some community organizing with a US nonprofit that had a chapter in Tokyo. And I was really invested. I spent 4 years, my first 4 years as a working adult independently, were all in Japan. They were all abroad and I had never worked in the US. And so during the pandemic, I was just about to do like my first bilingual workshop and I was really excited. I passed N2. I was like really it was like something I'd been waiting for such a long time, but not everything goes as planned. And so within a day, all the events got canceled, everything changed. And I ended up going back within 2 months back to the States without a plan. And I felt this huge like rupture of like relationships, just like with like friends and community. It was all just kind of felt like it was ripped away, even though I made the decision to go home. Having, you've all lived in Japan at some point, and it's like if you lose a job that ties you to the country that you're living in, it has a like a little bit more of a weight than if we lost our job in a country that we can be a citizen living in. And so that was a big turning point for me. And I was in the back of my mind hoping to eventually connect back to Japan, but it honestly was really, it was a big heartbreak for me. And I didn't know how I was going to connect back with Japan. Um, Anytime I thought about it, actually brought back kind of sad memories because I realized I was outside the country and I didn't know if I could even return to Japan at that point. So what turned out to be my quote action plan that I didn't plan for was I worked at my dad's dental office in the front desk area for about 8 months on the side doing freelance website designing and like Canva, what is it called? Social media content creation. And then throughout conversations with people about either business or building up a nonprofit with a friend, people are going through relocations and career transitions. There became this really obvious thing that I was like craving to be able to do, which was actually help people create a safe space for conversations that were a little bit beyond just career advice. And so during that time of giving career advice and working with people, there were a lot of emotions to carry and hold space for. And so because I didn't feel equipped to deal with that, I used this turning point to actually go deeper into coaching. And so I signed up, or I applied for a certification that was more psychotherapy based, and LMFT, so life, marriage, family counselor, therapist background. And this really helped me create some type of opportunity for people who were like myself, who came back, who didn't really have an understanding of what they could do next. And throughout this whole process, so like I came back in 2020, and over the next, 3 years, these values that I have written in the middle here, like non-negotiables, freedom of like time and schedule, and also like money that provides for my lifestyle, seeing progress in what I do, or who I'm working with, self-expression. So being able to like my hair, you can't see it, it's like purple right now. I couldn't do that in Japan when I was working in the positions that I was in. Taking care of myself was never a huge priority in Japan, and it became really important when you're starting to work as a coach and working with people's emotions and like careers and relationships, like really delicate conversations. And excellence, because there's a part of me that does like have a really, what is it called? You don't need to have an LLC when you start a business, but in my head, I was very adamant on having things look a certain way. And so I think for me that the reputation, like you live in Japan, is a lot about like how people view you and that kind of thing is still a pretty big value in my world. And so despite all the different types of jobs I've had, the mission that has been the same, or it's like culminated into a mission that sounds like I help people be more trusting, self-trusting, and be able to create a safe space for making their own decisions. And it's a very personal mission, but it's also something that I love to work on with other people and help them reach that. And so we have a lot of questions that will be coming up on slides throughout this session. And the reason is not to overwhelm you all with questions for yourself. However, it is really significant to highlight the why, and like why you're in this session, why you're pivoting in your career, and what's motivating that change. Jessica and Emily and I were talking a bit about how we could make a change in a job, but if we don't actually know what it is that's not satisfying anymore about our situation, similar patterns, work patterns, and lacking of values and things like that can show up in any job, and it actually follows you where you go. So reflecting on the why is a really big part of this. And Emily, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to this portion other than talking to a
Yeah.
coach, but yeah.
Definitely, yes. Always reach out to a coach if you have questions. But yeah, I think really what we're hoping you get out of this initial set of questions is just us to start thinking about some of this, because you have reasons, right? There are specific reasons you joined us today. So do start thinking about this, because we can connect the how and the what, but we really do need to know what your motivation is before we get there. All right, let's hop to the next slide. All right. So if you've ever had any time with me or been to one of the sessions I have presented at for, you will know that I am crazy big on values. So as you are thinking through this, really be engaging with those values. Really think about what is important to you. What do you need from this next thing? What's holding you back? Where are you feeling stuck in this process? What kinds of barriers are you envisioning? And have you investigated if they're really there? What's going on inside of you that makes you feel like, okay, maybe now is the time, but I don't know how to go about this or what my next steps might be. The last question here about making the wrong decision, this is something we felt was really important, because I think we can all get a little bit paralyzed when we're making decisions around career, right? And so I talk to people a lot who say, well, what if I don't choose the right thing? And what I always say is that chances that there's a single correct thing that would make you happy and everything else is going to suck are pretty slim. So, as long as you're kind of making decisions based on things like your values, your needs, those kinds of things, I don't really think you can go terribly wrong. If you do wind up in a situation that doesn't feel entirely right as you go into it, guess what? We can look at other changes for you. So you're not stuck in something, and you're not likely to choose something completely wrong for yourself. You know who you are by this point. You know what kinds of situations you have enjoyed. And so as you're kind of walking through this, try to talk yourself down from that sense of paralysis and sort of anxiety around making a right or a wrong career decision. Christy, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I'm scanning through, and I just want to like congratulate and applaud a lot of people who added their why in this questionnaire in the beginning of why are you pivoting or thinking about a career change. I'm noticing that a lot of people here at least have identified the initial motivation, which could be like I want to try something new and different and interesting. And so what that's telling me is that for folks who are writing about that, like one of your values can be considered, well, it's up to you how you want to word it, but like growth is a big thing for a lot of folks that I work with in the jet community. And it's really interesting because it's it can become a, how do I say, a mindset block. Each time you join a company, you learn everything that you want to in the role, and all of a sudden it's no longer fulfilling. And so noticing what we are writing here in this document and actually translating that to core values can be really helpful in navigating and being creative about thinking about the next step. So emphasizing what Emily has just said, like it it may not look like there are values popping out of these sentences, but uh I see a lot. I see a lot of like a lot of growth, a lot of connecting to uh Japan, whether that's professionally or personally. And I think you can definitely have these come into your lives in different ways. It doesn't have to be like the core, not like the core job that you are spending a lot of your time with. Um, but yeah, it's a good start, and I think it's a really um, great group that's pretty aware of like where they're at. So I'm happy to continue on and talk a little bit more about this. So these second set of questions are, they have a different tone to it. A lot of times, you know, we think about what we don't like in the job, but I also want to give you the chance and opportunity to reflect on what excites you about either the job transition or a change, and what possibilities you can start seeing for yourself. Because oftentimes it's one or the other. It's like a very binary situation. It's like, well, I don't want to go this route because what if this happens, X, Y, Z, and you kind of start to eliminate options by going down that path. However, these questions, if you ask yourself, what lights you up about your own potential, what career do you see yourself thriving in? It's like the opposite side of the coin. And so you just have this kind of voice on your shoulder that's encouraging you to get creative and push yourself outside the boundaries that maybe society, your friends and family, or even your past experiences have shown you. And I just encourage a lot of these type of questions as well when I do talk to folks about career changes, because it can also shed some light on the next path, or how to connect to the next path as well. So moving on. So rather than us talking this whole time, we want to give you some space in this session to actually answer one or two of these questions for yourself. So whether that's on your computer, you can type this into notes or some type of Google Doc that you have, or if you are pen and paper type of person, go ahead and select one or two questions, and we'll give you about like 2 minutes to think about this either in your head, or you can write it down.
All right. So once you've got your values sorted out and the questions you want to answer, we got to take action, right? So what are the aligned steps that you want to be taking, right? And a lot of this we can go into in more depth, but we're we're over halfway through the time because it's Belize and Ray Pie. So let us know if you have questions about any of this, but be thinking about what these action steps are for you, and what kinds of actions you would like to take. Christy, do you have anything to add?
This one we'll touch on it on the next slide, but just this reminder, asterisk mark, I think I mentioned it earlier, but understanding like the deeper why to why you're leaving, because sometimes sometimes it is compensation and salary and it's clear as day. Sometimes it's something beneath that, and vice versa. Sometimes we think it might be a personal clash of personalities, but actually there's something deeper that's going on. So it's definitely it's good to go deeper and deeper into the why, and that's the main thing before going into action. So if we go to the next slide, yeah, I'll let Emily do this part and I'll do the second part of this slide actually.
All right, that works. So yeah, so when you're trying to figure out what's next, it's really easy to get kind of caught in the details and to get stuck and feel like you can't move on. And so one of the things that you can do really is start digging as you're kind of figuring this out, right? So obviously we can do research online, right? Anyone can look up a job title and find information online. It can get a little overwhelming. There's a ton of information out there. But if you have an idea of kind of some ideas that are clear to you, plug them in to your search, look them up, and then go to sources that are a little bit more trustworthy, right? So if you look at, Jeff's career blog, we don't know who Jeff is, right? He might be just saying crazy things. We don't know who he is. But if you find something that's written up on, let's say, Indeed actually has a lot of really nice resources for career information. Or if you find something that is in keeping with what you want to do, right? So you're looking in the nonprofit sector and there's something about that job on the Ask a Manager blog, for instance. So vet your sources a little bit. I will also share a resource that I like a lot for some basic research in terms of what careers kind of look like. But also, as you're doing your digging, be thinking about informational interviews and job shadowing. If you're not super familiar with these terms, they're really just kind of what they sound like. So an informational interview would be, I would call Jessica and say, hey, Jessica, I'm really interested in this thing you're doing with USJETAA. I'd love to find ways to re-engage with my JET community. Can I have like half an hour of your time? We're both in Denver. I'd love to buy you a cup of coffee and really pick your brain about this career and hear what your career path has been, right? And so then you sit down together either virtually or in person, and you just will go through the questions you have for that person. That can include things like if there's certifications, what a normal sort of starting salary range is going to be, etc. And job shadowing is kind of the next step. So let's say you've had a really good conversation with a few people in a field. Unless there are, super secret proprietary pieces to it, you can say, you know what, I think this might be a really good fit. Is there a way we could arrange a day or half a day of job shadowing for me? I'd love to see this work actually happen in real life. And a lot of industries do, in fact, allow this. And it's nice because you get this picture of the work that you wouldn't ordinarily. Now, obviously, it does depend. If you're going to job shadow an accountant, you're going to watch somebody type things all day. You won't necessarily get a super rich picture of the work. But if it's someone who, for example, teaches an accounting class, that person is probably going to be able to kind of talk you through it. And so you can really begin to see what it is. So knowledge is power and all of that. I see there's a bunch of stuff in the chat. So I'm going to turn it over to Christy. And as I do that, I am going to find my favorite link for doing some of this basic career research and put it in the chat.
Awesome. And I'm also like, I was reading some of the things in the chat too. So I'll try to be commenting back to some of these while we're switching off. And Jessica, if you could go one more to the next one. Awesome. Thank you. So the other thing that I want to just highlight is not underselling yourself. I'm going to share a series of slides that share how I have looked back at my careers, or like different moments of my career and the different skills that I saw that like evolved over time and have become pillars for the job and the work that I do currently, both in my current coaching business, but also as program director of a nonprofit here up in Palo Alto in California. And so just a reminder that you have many skills that will translate. There aren't too many skills unless you're in specifically like engineering that you're going to need that don't translate from JET or all the other jobs that you've had up until now. But learning how to show people that these skills are relevant and knowing how to talk about yourself and the things that you've done in a way that makes sense to the person listening to you is where all the magic happens. So on the next slide, I'm going to show you just a brief overview of the skills that I felt that I was able to cultivate during my first 3 roles. So JET was my first full-time position after graduating from university. Throughout that experience, adaptability, cross-cultural communication, classroom creativity, kind of also making a little bit of a fool of myself in front of people, that really got me out of my comfort zone to then do other things later on. And scheduling skills, even though it was maybe, just 5 or 6 classes a day, it really blended and bled into like time management, energy management later. As a recruiting consultant in Tokyo, that was a bit more like customer service client facing, but it also was similar to how I had to interface with all the different teachers on the JET program. Like each person that you meet has different needs. Cold calling was huge in recruitment, whether it's cold or warm calling. Everyone comes from a different cultural background. Tokyo is a very international place. You really never know who's going to be on the other side of the phone and what kinds of sensitivities or the way that you should talk to them and how they will be receptive or not, especially as a recruiter. Personally, it has a big reputation of being like a money hungry headhunting type of role, and that clashed a lot with who I saw myself as. And so cross-cultural communication through the JET program really helped me throughout all the other roles that I've had. The creativity and putting myself out there in a different way helped with building relationships and running like community events within the recruiting field, and then scheduling bled into time management because as a recruiter you set your own schedule 24/7. And so this was really important and is where also I started to notice that my desire to have freedom and time was a huge value of mine. So moving forward to also this last column that shares about my coaching experience, it the coin kind of flipped from adaptability, customer service to now self-awareness. as a business owner, you have to know yourself very well in order to run the business and know how things are going to work. Going from cultural communication in JET to cold calling as a recruiter to then having clarity calls, which are essentially sales calls when you're talking to people who are potential clients as a coach. And then marketing is a huge thing that unless you have the financial resources to hire somebody to do this for you, you're running it on your own as a single business owner. And so that, being creative in JET and also doing community events really helped me and supported me in the marketing side of running my business. And rather than just time management, energy management became a really big thing. So depending on what type of job and career you're in, one thing that's really interesting to take note of is not just how much time you're spending at the job, but noticing what task at your job and who you interface with drains you of energy or gives you energy. And so this is something that I really started to tap into. And again, stemming from JET, like all of these things really started to layer on one another. And so now, as the program director of an 11-day, 2 times a year program that I run up in NorCal, it's in person, it's for inbound students and young professionals coming from Asia. It couldn't be more aligned to my past 3 roles. And this shows you pretty well how it's tied together. But on the next slide, you'll see that jumping straight from JET to this position that I have right now probably would not have made sense. And right now, I get to do both connect with people in Japan, but also other parts of Asia. And it's really, when I look at this now, because it's my own career, I can see how they connect. But if I were to go to someone and say, this is how my, experiences before in Japan relate to this current role, it would be really hard to have that conversation without having these interim roles. And this is just my experience. However, I think it's very much worth your time to do something like this and visualize the different skills that you've developed throughout your career and kind of put it on like post-it notes on a piece of paper and just pick and choose the ones that you think have developed over time and see if those align with, the roles that you're looking for. And that will help you start to build this story of how to share with colleagues, friends, potential hiring managers, and let people know what you see in yourself. Because as long as you can communicate that in a confident and competent way, people will see that in you and they will be able to see your vision. And also, if you can communicate what your mission is, which we'll get to a little bit later, that's another really good way to communicate your transferable skills. Does anyone have any questions around that?
There's so much going on in the chat right now too. It's great. I'm really glad people are
I'm
sharing.
trying to keep up with it.
Yeah, this is wonderful though. I mean, this is nice. It is a safe space and people are taking advantage of that, which is really great.
Yep, it is. All right. And I am trying to keep up with the chat here, but I will fail. I'm not real great at it. So if you have a question or a concern that we don't adequately address in our remaining 15 minutes, which seems somewhat likely, definitely reach out to us. We definitely want to be able to help you really kind of work through this. And of course, everybody's situation is rich and fraught enough that we can't necessarily answer all the questions to your satisfaction in this short session, but hopefully we will give you some resources and really get you thinking about it. So do reach out to us. All right. What else can we address for you all here today?
I am going to follow up this session as well. So I'll share Christy and Emily's contact information. I'll also share the PowerPoint or the slide deck because there's a lot of information in there. I know it's a lot to take in. So if you feel like
Yeah.
you're madly scribbling it all down, you can relax because I'll send it all to you. Christy, you want me to go on to the next slide? I know this is just sort of a recap of where each of us came from and where we're headed.
Yeah, so I think again, like so Jessica will share this with you all. This slide is really just to give you a visual of what our quote like mission statements are, and what that is in the context of this conversation is your umbrella trajectory for your career. The reason why we're highlighting this is because oftentimes it's easy to pinpoint what we want to do, and it eliminates a lot of opportunities that could really get you to the end goal. And it also eliminates opportunities for you to expand within your mission. So if you are able to cultivate a sentence based off your current and past work experiences, or even volunteer experiences. This is really just a life mission. If you're able to curate something, it's a working statement for yourself. This will help you be able to say yes or no to certain steps in a specific direction, and ultimately open what we say in like coaches, like open the aperture. So it's like, rather than see something so narrowed as in, I need to use Japanese like 50% for 50% of my job, otherwise I won't be happy. Like, I would contest that a little bit and get curious, like, what are you actually trying to get out of this? And having a mission statement is something that I want to invite all of you to think about as a takeaway from this exercise. So Jessica, if you move forward 2 slides, actually. Coming back to this chart, you can approach this question in like either way, but from my experience, going from the what can be a good starter point from a career standpoint. But Emily posed this question early in our conversations about if you're not sure where to direct your mission statements, asking yourself, what problem do you want to be, or do I want to be part of solving? And if something really clicks for you, you can start to jot down your what, and then you can start to think about, well, how can I contribute to solving that problem? And then you'll go deeper to the why do I care? And that's the core part that's going to relate to a lot of your values, and even your past experiences in Japan will likely be tied into that as well. Not always, but it can be very influential in your decision making. And so this is one method to creating this storytelling kickoff statement that is your mission statement. And these are all, like everything we've shared today, are tips and ideas of how you can have a fuller conversation. So this is much faster than we would typically talk about this in a coaching session one-on-one.
Yeah.
But we also want to leave you with some key mindset tips for career pivots. So this final slide, this next slide will be our final bit of tips and tricks and just mindset reframes. So Emily, maybe I can do
I'm gonna actually interrupt for just a second because there was a question in the chat a little while back that was sort of asking about different career paths, like, what kind of career paths people can take. And somebody said, I'm not really sure what to do besides teaching. And so the place that my brain took that comment was, I'm going to go back to here, was, what can I do in Japan besides teaching? And I wanted to bring up, I hear this a lot, like when I go to Japan, I don't want to teach, but I want to do something else. And so I think it's really important to acknowledge that you want to have a connection to Japan. But that's not your only, that's not your only pathway. Your pathway shouldn't be go to Japan and then figure out what I can do. It should be figure out what you want to do and then figure out how you can connect that to Japan. There are so many ways that you can connect a myriad of industries and sectors and career fields to Japan. And you'll see those connections once you get into those career fields. They might not be obvious right at the start, but I think it's really important to figure out what it is that you want to do first, and then take the next step to figure out how to connect that to Japan. You can't always, have everything that you want in your first career step, especially when you're making a change. But if you can slowly work towards it and be strategic and think about that in the long term, you can eventually get there. So sorry to interrupt. I'll move us back to where we were.
No, it's a good point and it's important. And remember that all of this stuff is going to be very, very unique to you. So we are absolutely delighted to help provide some resources and so forth. But of course, you are the ultimate decision maker. I did throw into the chat a really quick career quiz that you can take. It's just called My Next Move. It's a federal government quiz. It is definitely not a particularly sexy quiz. We'll send that out as well for information for you. It'll take you seriously 2 minutes, though. It's a really, really quick and simple quiz, but it's so helpful if you're feeling really overwhelmed and lost. The information you'll get on that site is local to the US. So if you're in Japan or if you're thinking you do actually want to go back, just know that the information is still going to be largely reliable, but the salary information may be a little bit different. And some of the details of what you would do in a particular job may also change. All right, Christy, do you want to tackle the mindset stuff here, or do you want me to?
I'll share a little bit, and then if you and Jessica want to just like open up to questions and answers, that might be potentially good use of the last 7 minutes. I'm also okay to go like an extra 5 to 10 if there are like just popping questions that could benefit more than one person. So quick mindset reframes, they're written here for you, but sometimes really hard to digest. So when pivoting in a career, just reminding yourself that it's not starting over. You're really just layering on your past experiences. You are not starting from ground zero. You're starting with a wealth of experience. And you are also incorporating, what you've done in the past with what you will do in the future. I'm reading some comments in the comment section too, and I know it's really it can be difficult to see the opportunity coming straight from the JET program, but I will say that we don't get a lot of validation during the JET program. Joining spaces where there are JET alumni has been really fulfilling for me, just in reminding me that the work that I did for 2 years and then for like 2 more extra years in Japan, like that was solid global like career work. Regardless of what people tell you it is, I can tell you personally that like my parents saw my time, my whole 4 years in Japan as like not really a real job because it wasn't America. And so you're gonna hear a lot of things. You're gonna hear that, oh, JET's like from different people. People have their different opinions. A lot of times it comes from personal judgment. They could never see themselves doing that. They could never see themselves going abroad. It's scary for them. And so they worry that you're not going to find a job when you come back. But my biggest thing is just don't let other people's assumptions of what will happen to you become your own mindset. I'll leave it at that. I have a lot to say about it, but Emily, any other key reminders?
Yeah, I did. There's been a little bit here in the chat about just people feeling a lot of self-doubt and uncertainty around moving forward. I just want to address that. So first of all, the main thing I want to say is that is so normal. And it's really normal in this group in particular, because this tends to be a group of people who are a little bit more self-reflective and who really do genuinely want the work that we do to have some kind of positive impact in the world. And those things, alas, really do kind of dovetail with concerns about like, am I competent? What can I even do, et cetera, et cetera. So 2 things I'll say real quickly. One is, first of all, remember you up and moved to Japan. Like, really, how many of your non-JET friends would ever have the nerve to do something like that, right? That's a pretty big freaking deal. So that's number one. Number two, You have actually already accomplished lots and lots of things. So when people are in this very heavy space of self-doubt, what I tell them to do really often is start making a list of your accomplishments. Initially, they might feel a little bit silly, right? You can think, well, I don't know what I've accomplished. I guess I said I would eat some vegetables today and I did. They can start off being very silly. What you're doing is training your brain to identify accomplishments. And then you can go back over your whole work history. Well, that'll take a while, but if you're as old as I am, it'll take a really long time. Let's just start kind of working through it. Because once you've really reminded yourself that you can take note of accomplishments, first of all, you'll have them hopefully all in one space. And second of all, you can just train yourself to think of those things before you think of the problems and the barriers and the places where you don't feel like you're very smart, et cetera, et cetera. And then the sort of addendum to all of that is that the stuff that you do that feels almost effortless, I promise you it's not effortless. That is your zone of genius. That is stuff that you have worked really hard to get good at. And so you do it almost without thinking about it. So those are my closing words there. And look at that. We have 3 minutes left. So anyone have anything else?
I want to acknowledge a comment that somebody put in the chat saying, how do I determine when I'm overshooting when I send in a resume for a position, and how do I determine if it's okay to take that shot if I don't fit all the requirements listed? Probably no one is ever going to fit all the requirements that are listed in any job posting ever. So don't let that dissuade you from going for it. If someone was going to fulfill all those requirements, they wouldn't be shooting for that job. They'd be shooting for the next job above them. So don't let that, don't let that throw you off course.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And if you haven't found a job post yet, don't even get me started, man. I worked in a bookstore. I went to cooking school. Like I was in so many different places all at once. So I totally feel you. It's not unusual. And I'm giant. I'm going to make me smaller. And I promise you, there's hope. This isn't a reflection of some core failure that you have. You just haven't figured out what the thing is. And once you figure it out, you can really start kind of working towards it. It's really hard when it's just a theory, though. Like, I don't know, I think I want to do something that kind of looks like this. What does that even mean? So work to get clear on what it is and why you want to do it. And from there, it gets a little easier to work through all of the kind of troublesome pieces in the process.
That's fantastic. I want to acknowledge that pivoting mid-career, when you're at the mid-career point of your life, that pivoting is really hard. It's almost as hard as starting out, because you're taking stock of everything that you've done and you don't want to start over in an entry-level space again. So take the time to answer all these questions that Christy and Emily put forward today. I think they really do help you think more deeply about why it is you want to change, what it is you've done, and how valuable that can be as you bring it forward into your next career decision. Because, all of those things are going to help build it up so that you're coming to a new potential hiring manager with a package of something that is valuable, instead of just coming to them and saying, oh, I've never done this before. But I don't really want to be hired at entry level wages, right? So if you can say, I've never done this job before, but I've done all these other things that are an obvious connection. Like I really love that chart that Christy put together, and she suggested doing it at home with Post-it notes. I think that's like money right there. It's so great. It's like it makes you think through all your different positions, and then you can start to see the trajectory, and you can see your thread through from what you've done in the past to where you want to go in the future. So I thought that was really valuable. We are at 1 hour. I want to thank Christy and Emily so much for their time and thoughtfulness and bringing together all the resources and ideas and questions that they came with this evening. As I mentioned before, I will follow up with an email and a link to this recording and the slide deck and contact information for both Emily and Christy, and a few other resources that were mentioned tonight that hopefully will be helpful to you. Thank you all for joining. I hope that this was valuable and helping you start to think more deeply about where you want to go from here and how to get there. And I hope that many of you can make it to our next career event on March 19th, which is called Fuel. It'll be at the same time. And we're going to have a lot of really fantastic JET alums there as well, talking about all kinds of things, digital profiles, how to figure out what it is you're worth, salary negotiations, all that kind of stuff. So it's going to be a really powerful workshop. That is it. I'm going to stop.